There is a strange moment in a person's financial life that almost nobody prepares them for. It happens when you open your investment account and you see roughly $300,000 looking back at you. Not 30,000, not 100,000, 300,000. That is real money. It is serious money. It is more than most people ever manage to keep invested in their entire lives. It represents years of work, years of decisions that did not feel exciting when you made them. And yet, when you see it, the feeling is often not freedom. It is not even relief. It is something more complicated because you still have to go to work. You still have bills. You still have deadlines. You still have a mortgage or rent or insurance or family responsibilities. You still have to think about income. You are not financially independent. You are not sitting on a beach. You are not free from the system. So a question appears in your mind: if $300,000 does not change everything, what does? That question is important because it shows you are standing at a transition point. Most people misunderstand that transition. They think 300,000 is just another number. They think the real number is 1 million or 2 million or whatever number they heard someone mention on the internet. But in my experience, the point is not that 300,000 gives you freedom. It does not. The point is that 300,000 changes the machine. It changes the relationship between your labor and your capital. It changes who is doing the work. It changes the speed at which the system can move if you do not interrupt it. That is the part most investors miss. They get to this point and they look around and, I still feel the same. I still live the same. I still work the same. Maybe this is not working. And that is a dangerous conclusion, because many of the most important changes in life do not feel dramatic when they begin. A debt cycle does not feel dangerous on the first day. A bubble does not feel insane when it first starts. A good habit does not feel powerful after the first week. And compounding does not feel unstoppable the moment it begins working. It starts quietly, it starts beneath the surface. Then, if you give it enough time, it becomes the dominant force in the system. To understand why 300,000 matters, you have to stop thinking about wealth as a straight line. Most people imagine money this way. If it took them 10 or 15 years to reach 300,000, then reaching 1 million must mean repeating the same amount of effort 2 or 3 more times. Save more, work more, sacrifice more, wait longer. That sounds reasonable, but it is not how compounding works. The path from 0 to 300,000 and the path from 300,000 to 1 million are not the same journey. They may be measured in the same dollars, but they are driven by different forces. From 0 to 50,000, nearly everything depends. Your paycheck is the engine, your savings rate is the engine, your ability to say no is the engine. If the market gives you a little return, it barely changes anything. If you have $10,000 invested and the market rises 8%, you made $800. That is helpful, but it does not change your life. It does not replace your income. It does not feel like freedom. So in the beginning, investing feels unfair. You work hard, you cut back, you avoid foolish purchases, you try to make responsible decisions, and the account moves slowly. Sometimes it hardly moves at all. Sometimes it goes down even after you did everything right. That early phase is not mainly a test of investment knowledge. It is a test of temperament. You are pushing against gravity. The system is still small. Your capital has not yet become large enough to help you in a meaningful way. You are like a person trying to start a flywheel by hand. At first, every turn requires effort. The wheel is heavy, it resists movement. Nothing about it feels natural, from 50,000 to 100,000. The flywheel begins moving a little, but you are still doing most of the work. Your contributions matter. If you are saving $15,000 or $20,000 a year, that amount still dominates what the portfolio produces. A good year in the market is encouraging, but the real progress still comes from your discipline. From 100,000 to 200,000, the relationship starts changing. At this point, a normal market return can add real money. 10% on 100,000 is $10,000. 10% on 2, you begin seeing numbers that actually feel like something. But even then, your effort is still central. You still feel like the one carrying the load. You are still making the sacrifices. You are still avoiding lifestyle creep. You are still putting money into the machine when other people are spending theirs. And then eventually you reach 300,000 on the surface. Nothing magical happens. No one sends you a medal. Your bank does not. Congratulations, you have crossed into a different phase. Your life does not suddenly become easy, but the internal math of the system has changed. Imagine you earn $90,000 a year and you save 20% of your income. That is $18,000 a year going into your investments. That is a very strong savings habit. Most people never sustain that level of discipline for very long. Now imagine you have $300,000 invested. If that portfolio earns 8% in a normal year, it produces $24,000 of growth. Stop and think about what that means. Your money just produced more than your annual savings. You did not work more hours. You did not ask for a raise. You did not change jobs. You did not take a second job. You did not build a new business. You simply kept capital invested, and the capital produced more progress than your labor-based savings. That is the shift. Your money is starting to work as hard as you do. In some years, it will work harder. That is why 300,000 is not just a milestone. It is a turning point in the power structure of your financial life. Before that point, labor dominates capital. After that point, capital begins to compete with labor. Later, if you do not break the chain, capital begins to dominate labor. But here is where people get into trouble. Even after the math changes, the emotions do not immediately catch up. You may see your account move from 300,000 to 320,000 and think, that is nice, but it still does not change my life. You may see it move to 350,000 and still feel impatient. You may see it move to 400,000 after a few years and still wonder why it does not feel like the dramatic breakthrough you expected. That impatience is dangerous because it causes people to interrupt the process at the exact moment the process is beginning to become powerful. Compounding is a curve, but human emotion thinks in straight lines. People want a sudden feeling of transformation. They want to feel rich. They want to feel rewarded. They want the account balance to finally give them permission to relax. But compounding does not operate according to human desire. It operates according to time, rate of return, reinvestment, and uninterrupted continuity. That last word matters most. Continuity. Compounding needs an unbroken chain. The longer the chain stays intact, the more powerful it becomes. But if you break it when the curve is beginning to rise, you lose more than the dollars you removed. You lose the future growth those dollars would have produced. This is why the 300,000 stage is so psychologically dangerous. For years, you were disciplined because you had no choice. You knew you were still climbing. You knew the account was not big enough to feel secure. You knew you had to keep going. But at 300,000, a new voice appears. It says, you have been responsible long enough. It says, you deserve something. It says, you can afford to upgrade. It says, what is the point of building wealth if you never enjoy it? That voice is not always wrong. You should not live a miserable life in the name of a number. But you must understand the cost of listening to that voice too early. Because 300,000 is not the reward. It is the engine. And if you dismantle the engine right after it starts running, you will spend the next decade wondering why the machine never carried you forward. Consider a simple example. A person reaches 300,000 and decides to buy a $40,000 car. They tell themselves they earned it. They tell themselves they are still being responsible because they have 260,000 left. They can make the math look reasonable, but the real cost is not 40,000. At an 8% return over 20 years, 40,000 can become roughly 185,000. A $60,000 lifestyle upgrade can become more than 270,000 of future wealth that never exists. The object you bought is not the whole cost. The lost compounding is the cost. This is what people miss because the future is invisible. At the moment of decision, the car is visible. The bigger house is visible. The vacation is visible. The approval from other people is visible. The future compounding you destroyed is invisible. And invisible costs are the most dangerous costs in finance. This is why people who eventually reach several million often look strangely boring at 300,000. They do not appear to be celebrating. They do not dramatically upgrade. They do not suddenly start acting rich. They protect the machine. They understand that 300,000 is the point where the machine begins to have weight. It is not time to take it apart. It is time to feed it and leave it alone. But lifestyle inflation is only one threat. The other threat is fear. When you have 30,000 invested and the market falls 25%, you lose $7,500 on paper. That hurts. But it does not feel like your life has been destroyed. When you have 300,000 invested and the market falls 25%, the number is different. You are down $75,000 that can feel like years of work disappearing in a few months. Your rational mind may know that markets move in cycles. It may know that drawdowns are normal. It may know that long-term investing requires volatility. But the emotional system inside you does not experience a $75,000 decline as a statistical event. It experiences it as danger, and danger changes behavior. You start checking the account more often. You start reading more headlines. You start imagining worse scenarios. You begin to think, maybe I should protect what I have. Maybe I should go to cash for a while. Maybe I should wait until things are clearer. That phrase, until things are clearer, has destroyed a great deal of wealth. Markets rarely give clarity at useful prices. When prices are low, the news is frightening. When the news feels safe, prices are often much higher. That is the trade-off. You cannot usually get both emotional comfort and excellent opportunity at the same time. So if you sell at $225,000 after a decline and wait for comfort, you may feel safer for a while. But if the market recovers before your confidence does, the chain is broken. Your portfolio could have returned to $300,000, then continued compounding from there. Instead, you are sitting in cash trying to decide when it feels safe to re-enter. That decision did not merely cost you $75,000. It cost you continuity. And continuity is the hidden asset. At $300,000, you must become more systematic than emotional. You need principles. You need a process. You need rules that were built when you were calm, so you do not have to invent them when you are afraid. One of the most important rules is this: do not interrupt long-term compounding because of short-term emotion. That does not mean you ignore risk. It means you understand the risk you are actually taking. There is market risk, there is inflation risk, there is concentration risk, there is job risk, there is behavioral risk. At $300,000, behavioral risk may be the greatest of all because the portfolio is now large enough that bad emotional decisions are expensive. When your account is small, mistakes are tuition. When your account is large enough to compound, mistakes are opportunity costs that can follow you for decades. This is also where the role of your paycheck begins to change. In the early years, your career is the main driver. A raise matters enormously. A better job matters enormously. Increasing your income may be the single best way to accelerate the first stage. If your portfolio is $10,000, a $10,000 raise doubles your annual investing potential. But at $300,000, your portfolio starts becoming a second economic engine. An 8% return is $24,000. A 10% return is $30,000. A strong year in markets can produce more than many people save in several years. That does not mean salary no longer matters. It still matters. Income gives you stability, optionality, and new capital to invest. But the hierarchy begins. Your most powerful lever is often earning more and saving more. After $300,000, your most powerful lever becomes protecting the invested base, staying allocated intelligently, avoiding destructive withdrawals, and letting compounding operate. In other words, the game shifts from accumulation by force to accumulation by momentum. That shift requires maturity. A person who has only learned how to sacrifice may not yet know how to steward a growing system. They may become too aggressive because they want to get to freedom faster, or they may become too conservative because they finally have something to lose. Both mistakes come from misunderstanding the phase they are in. At $300,000, you do not need to gamble to make compounding meaningful. The account is already large enough to produce meaningful growth if you give it time. But you also do not want to retreat into fear so completely that inflation and low returns slowly weaken your progress. The balance is not excitement. The balance is principle. A good investor at this stage thinks in probabilities, not predictions. They do not say, I know exactly what will happen next year. They say, I know that if I stay diversified, keep costs low, avoid panic, control lifestyle inflation, and continue adding capital, the odds are heavily in my favor over long periods. That is a different way of thinking. It is not emotional certainty. It is probabilistic confidence. And probabilistic confidence is what allows you to stay steady when the world becomes noisy. Now let us look at the path from $300,000 to $1 million with clear eyes. If you have $300,000 invested and earn an average annual return of 8% without adding another dollar, the account can grow to around 650,000 in 10 years and around 1.4 million in 20 years. If you continue contributing 18,000 per year along the way, the path changes even more. The account can move toward 1 million much faster, not because you are doing something heroic, but because two forces are working together. Your capital is compounding. Your contributions are still adding. That combination is powerful. For a long time, contributions are the main driver. Then growth becomes the main driver. And eventually, if the system remains intact, the portfolio's annual movement can exceed your entire salary. This is the point where people say, it happens suddenly. This is where people must also be careful about comparison. Someone else may buy a bigger house. Someone else may drive a more impressive car. Someone else may post a better vacation. Someone else may seem to be living the reward phase while you are still in the compounding phase. The goal is not to avoid volatility. You cannot avoid volatility if you want long-term returns. The goal is to avoid being forced into bad decisions during volatility. That is why the investor who reaches 300,000 should build defenses around the machine: emergency reserves, reasonable spending, low-cost, diversified investments, a written plan, a clear rule for rebalancing, a commitment not to sell because headlines are frightening, a commitment not to raid the account because the number finally feels large. These defenses are not glamorous, but they are what keep the system alive. This is also why chasing shortcuts becomes especially dangerous at this stage. A person with 300,000 may feel tempted to make a big move. They may think, if I can just double this quickly, I will be close to freedom. That temptation is understandable, but it is often destructive. The irony is that once your portfolio becomes large enough for compounding to work meaningfully, you no longer need extreme risk in order to build serious wealth. What you need is enough return, enough time, and enough discipline not to damage the base. A person who takes reckless risk at 30,000 may lose painful but recoverable money. A person who takes reckless risk at 300,000 can destroy a decade of work. The bigger the base, the more important it becomes not to chase. When capital becomes powerful, preserving the compounding process can be more important than accelerating it. It is the chain of behavior that created it. That chain includes your saving habit, your investment habit, your resistance to panic, your ability to avoid status spending, your understanding of long-time horizons, and your willingness to keep going when progress feels slow. Protect that chain. Do not become one of those people. If you are near 300,000, or if you are working toward it, understand the nature of the place you are trying to reach. It will not feel like freedom. It will feel like responsibility. That is appropriate, because responsibility is what turns a milestone into a machine. Freedom comes later, when the machine has been protected long enough to produce income and optionality at a scale your labor cannot match. But the machine begins here, not at 1 million, not at retirement. Here at the point where your portfolio can begin producing more than your annual savings. At the point where capital stops being a small side effect and starts becoming a real economic actor in your life. At the point where staying boring becomes more valuable than looking successful. If you can understand that, 300,000 will not disappoint you. It will teach you. It will teach you that wealth is not built by feelings. It is built by systems. It will teach you that freedom is not a sudden event. It is the result of keeping an engine running until the engine becomes stronger than the worker. It will teach you that the most important financial decisions are often the ones nobody sees. The purchase you do not make, the panic sale you avoid, the contribution you continue, the allocation you keep, the lifestyle upgrade you postpone, the patience you practice when nothing dramatic seems to be happening. Those are not small decisions. They are the structure of the future. A person who understands 300,000 correctly does not say, "Why am I not free yet?" They say, "Now the machine is beginning to work. My job is to protect it." That change in thinking can alter the rest of your life. Most people quit or interfere before they ever feel that momentum. Do not do that. Stay invested. Keep contributing. Avoid breaking the chain. Keep your lifestyle below what your ego wants. Build reserves so fear cannot force your hand. Think in cycles, not headlines. Think in decades, not weeks. Think like a steward, not a consumer, because 300,000 is not the point where you stop. It is the point where you become more careful. It is the point where compounding begins to matter enough that your mistakes become expensive and your patience becomes extremely valuable. It is the point where your money is finally strong enough to start outworking you. Let the machine run, let time do what it does best. And one day, if you protect that process long enough, you will understand why 300,000 felt incomplete. It was incomplete. It was not freedom. It was the engine turning on.